not cave into US President's recent threats. We'll of course bring you the latest on this global trade war that's been sparked by Donald Trump.
Also on World DNA, the US claims to be starting direct high-level talks with Iran over its nuclear program, while Iran has stressed that they will be having indirect talks with the US, but has confirmed that the discussions are set for Saturday in Oman. How will that proceed further? This and a lot more lined up for you right here on World DNA. Let's start with the headlines.
Iran says it will hold indirect talks with the United States on Oman on Saturday after President Donald Trump claims that Washington has started direct high-level talks with Tehran over its nuclear program.
If that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
Donald Trump vows 50% extra duty on Chinese goods if Beijing does not retract its planned counter tariffs. China says it will fight US tariffs to the end.
Asia-Pacific markets rebounded with Japan's Nikkei soaring over 5%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Future showed a slight dip. Australia, South Korea and Japan all saw strong gains following losses over US tariff tensions.
US Supreme Court rejects 26/11 Mumbai terror attack accused Tawar Rana's plea to pause his extradition to India, clears the way for his handover.
Heavy rain leads to severe flooding in Democratic Republic of Congo. Dozens of people killed, hundreds forced to move.
Volcano erupts in central Philippines, sending plumes of ash over 4 kilometers into the sky. Candela Volcano is one of the 24 active volcanoes in the Philippines.
Donald Trump honors World Series champions LA Dodgers at the White House. The US president praised the likes of Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts in what he described as a legendary season. All right, Donald Trump has said that the United States is starting direct high-level talks with Iran over its nuclear program.
And while Iran has confirmed that the discussions are set for Saturday in Oman, but Iran has stressed that they will not be direct talks, they will be indirect. Now, Trump made the shock announcement during a White House meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump said he was hopeful of reaching a deal with Tehran, but warned that it would be in great danger if the talks failed.
Now, Trump did not say where the talks would take place, but insisted that they would not involve other countries and would be at almost the highest level.
And I'm not happy about what's going on with the bombing, because they're bombing like crazy right now. They're bombing. I don't know what's happening there. That's not a good situation. So we're meeting with Russia. We're meeting with Ukraine. And we're getting sort of close, but I'm not happy with all the bombing that's going on in the last week or so. Horrible. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing.
Iran has rejected direct negotiations, saying it's ready for indirect talks hours after Trump's announcement. Iranian Foreign Minister said that Iran and the US will meet in Oman on Saturday for indirect high-level talks.
Abbas Araghchi said on social media platform X that this is as much an opportunity as it is a test, adding that the ball is in America's court. Iran says it's awaiting a response by the United States on its generous offer for indirect nuclear talks.
We're now waiting to see what the United States decides in this matter. Iran's offer for indirect talks is a generous one, based on a responsible and well-thought-out decision, taking into account the history of this issue and how nuclear negotiations have played out over the past decade.
Trump's announcement came a day after Iran dismissed direct negotiations on a new deal to curb the country's nuclear program, calling the idea pointless. Trump had pulled out of the last deal in 2018 during his first presidency.
Now he has threatened that Iran could face military action if a deal is not reached. Trump warned that if talks aren't successful, Iran's going to be in great danger because they cannot have a nuclear weapon. There has been widespread speculation that Israel, possibly with the United States' help, might attack Iranian facilities if no new agreement is reached. But in response, Iran has vowed a swift and decisive response to any military attack.
Those making threats against the Islamic Republic of Iran should know that if any of those threats actually play out, they will face Iran's swift, decisive, and comprehensive response.
Amid Trump's threats, Russia, China and Iran are reportedly set to hold expert-level consultations on Iran's nuclear program in Moscow. The Kremlin has said that Russia is ready to do all it can to help resolve tensions between the US and Iran. And over in West Asia, with Israel continuing its ground offensive in Gaza, Egypt has put forward a new proposal now for a ceasefire with Hamas.
As per reports, the new Egyptian proposal provides for the return of 8 living and 8 dead hostages. In return, Israel would release a large number of Palestinian prisoners with the truce in place for a period of 40 to 70 days.
However, Israeli officials have denied receiving any new proposal from Cairo. And this comes after Trump and Netanyahu said that new negotiations were in the works to get more hostages released from Hamas captivity in Gaza. Speaking to reporters at the Oval Office, Trump said both the US and Israel are looking at another ceasefire.
We're looking at another ceasefire. We'll see what happens. But we want to get the hostages out. The Israeli people want the hostages out more than anything. They want the hostages out. This man is working very hard with us to do that.
Now, Trump has reiterated his desire for the US to take over the Gaza Strip. Trump suggested that Palestinians could be moved around to different countries to establish a freedom zone.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate, and I think it's something that we would be involved in. But having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip, would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone.
Israel has dramatically expanded its footprint in the Gaza Strip since the resumption of ground operations. It now controls over 50% of the territory and has doubled the size of the buffer zone in some places. Israel is also planning to double population of the Gaza border area in the next decade. Zeev Elkin, the minister in charge of rehabilitating the northern and southern borders, has said that they aim to increase the population living next to the Gaza border by to 120,000 by the 7th of October 2033.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has issued fresh evacuation orders for several areas in central Gaza. The IDF has warned residents of imminent attacks in response to rockets fired by Hamas.
According to the UN, nearly 400,000 Gaza residents have been displaced since Israel resumed military operations in the territory last month. Meanwhile, days after videos released by the Palestinian Red Crescent contradicted IDF's version of what led to the killing of 15 medics in Gaza, Israel Army Chief Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir has ordered an in-depth probe into the killing.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Donald Trump in Washington, becoming the first foreign leader to visit Trump since he unleashed tariffs on countries around the world.
Trump greeted the Israeli Prime Minister with a firm handshake as he arrived for the talks. The two leaders held talks at the Oval Office, following which Netanyahu said that Israel will work to eliminate the trade deficit very quickly and added that his country could serve as a model for many countries.
I said to the President a very simple thing. We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers, a variety of trade barriers that have been put up unnecessarily. And I think Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same.
The US president, however, ignored questions from reporters about whether he would lift tariffs on Israel. He declined to comment whether he plans to reduce the 17% tariffs he's imposed on Israel.
Well, we're talking about a whole new trade. Maybe not. Maybe not. Don't forget, we help Israel a lot. You know, we give Israel $4 billion a year. That's a lot. Congratulations, by the way. That's pretty good.
Shortly before their meeting, a scheduled press conference by the US President and the Israeli Prime Minister was cancelled. The White House did not offer any immediate explanation for why it was scrapped. Further, during their talks at the Oval Office, Trump touted himself as a mediator between Israel and Turkey over Syria, where both countries are jostling for influence. Trump claimed his great relations with the Turkish leader Erdogan as an avenue for the negotiations.
Netanyahu voiced Israeli concerns over Turkish influence in Syria. He said he does not want to see Syria being used by anyone, including Turkey, as a base for attacks on Israel.
We also discussed the situation in Syria. We've had neighborly relations with Turkey that have deteriorated, and we don't want to see Syria being used by anyone, including Turkey, as a base for attack on Israel. Turkey is a country that has a great relationship with the United States. The president has a relationship with the leader of Turkey. We discussed how we can avoid this conflict in a variety of ways, and I think we can't have a better interlocutor than the President of the United States for this purpose.
Turkey is a key backer of the Islamist-led coalition in Syria that toppled Bashar al-Assad in December after almost 14 years of civil war in the country. Its influence on Syria's new authorities has worried Israel, which has carried out strikes and ground incursions into the southern Syrian region to repel the government's forces from the border.
Now, according to reports, Netanyahu has been lobbying US Secretary of State Marco Rubio against selling F-35 multi-role fighter jets to Turkey. Netanyahu raised the issue in calls with Rubio over the last 2 months. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Listen to this.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Monday. Prime Minister Netanyahu sought relief from the recently imposed 17% tariffs on Israeli goods, saying that Israel will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. However, President Trump did not commit to lifting the tariffs, emphasizing the substantial help and aid that the United States provides to Israel. The two sides also talked about the ongoing conflict in Gaza, focusing on the status of Israeli hostages being held by Hamas. Additionally, President Trump made headlines announcing that direct talks with Iran regarding Iran's nuclear program is expected to commence on Saturday, warning Iran that it could face great danger if these negotiations ultimately are unsuccessful. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World as well.
The global trade war sparked by Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs has escalated even further. China has now said that it would not cave into the US president's recent threats on tariffs.
Now, Trump has vowed to levy extra 50% duty on Chinese imports if Beijing did not retract its planned counter tariffs. The US president also ruled out any pause in tariffs despite a dramatic market sell-off. Talking to reporters after meeting Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump was asked whether he was considering a pause on his new tariffs to allow for negotiations.
Would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that. We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals. And in certain cases, they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals.
Trump also reiterated his threat of additional tariffs on Chinese goods, criticizing China for ignoring his warning not to retaliate. Trump promised the new tariffs if Beijing did not retract its counter-tariff plans by Tuesday.
With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
Beijing hit back, saying that pressuring or threatening China is not a right way to engage. Liu Pengyu, spokesman for Beijing's embassy in the United States, said that China will firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
Trump also rejected a 0-for-0 tariff offer by the European Union, saying that it is not enough to account for the transatlantic trade deficit. Trump instead urged Europe to buy energy from the US.
We have a deficit with the European Union of $350 billion, and it's going to disappear fast. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that that can disappear easily and quickly is they're going to have to buy our energy from us because they need it. They're going to have to buy it from us. They can buy it. We can knock off $350 billion in 1 week.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has sought a bilateral tariff exemption for cars and other industrial goods, saying Europe is always ready to strike a good deal, but also warned of countermeasures to defend Europe's interests.
A 10% baseline tariff on US imports from around the world took effect on Saturday. A slew of countries will be hit by higher duties from Wednesday onwards, including the levy of 34% for Chinese goods as well as 20% for EU products. Asia-Pacific markets rebounded a little on Tuesday, with Japan's Nikkei soaring over 5%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng futures showed a slight dip. Australia, South Korea and Japan all saw strong gains following losses over US tariff tensions. Trillions of dollars have been wiped off combined stock market valuations in recent sessions.
Now, the Trump administration has come under fire for mistakenly deporting a man living in the US to a prison in El Salvador.
A US district judge issued a scathing opinion against the administration after the immigration officials admitted to having mistakenly deported Kilmar Abrigo Garcia. Garcia was among 238 Venezuelans and 23 Salvadorans the Trump administration deported to El Salvador's mega prison, the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism. Judge Paula Shinis said that Garcia was seized without any lawful authority and held without legal basis in direct contravention of US law.
The district judge further called the situation a grievous error that shocks the conscience and reaffirmed her earlier ruling that demands Garcia be returned to the US by Monday night. The Justice Department has asked an appeals court to dismiss Judge Shinis' order, but Garcia's deportation is just one of the series of mistakes made by the Trump administration.
Now, a day ago, several Ukrainian refugees who fled their country after Russia commenced its full-scale invasion were informed in an email that their legal status in the US was revoked.
However, soon after, the Department of Homeland Security issued an apology, claiming the mail was sent by mistake.
And over to France next. The political landscape in the country is going through a dramatic turnaround after far-right leader Marine Le Pen's conviction in an embezzlement case.
Now, thousands are out on the streets again, many in support of Le Pen, while others are there who support her conviction. But amid the divide, the National Rally leader is determined to fight for her political future.
On Sunday, Marine Le Pen addressed her supporters in Paris. The National Rally leader told attendees that she will be fighting the court's 5-year ban, which prevents her from running for office. Le Pen will be appealing against the conviction, which courts say might be taken up by 2026 to ensure a timely trial.
We will carry on fighting as we are doing, with discipline and dignity, despite the provocations that will inevitably come our way and which, to the despair of our opponents, we will not give in to.
Now, Le Pen was flanked by National Rally party leaders, including Jordan Bardella, who called for people to mobilize in Le Pen's support. Organizers of the rally say that close to 15,000 people were present there on Sunday.
And so I am only asking one thing from you. Help her. Help her in the face of injustice. Help her by pursuing the mobilization by our side. Help her by amplifying the patriotic wave everywhere in France. Join us.
Joignez-nous!
Gabriel Attal, head of French President Emmanuel Macron's centrist party, on Sunday sought to defend a court ruling against far-right leader Marine Le Pen. On the other hand, left-wing parties and left-leaning groups also rallied on Sunday in an attempt to rebuke the far-right's rally. Former Prime Minister Gabriel Attal addressed a gathering supporting the court's decision to convict Le Pen.
Our fight for authority is a fight for the authority of rules. How can we be credible in dealing with juvenile delinquents if politicians don't have to respect the rules? At Renaissance, we're fighting to get back to basics. As you said, Ambroise, you break, you fix, you dirty, you clean. We also say, you suffer, we take care of you. But that can't hold if exemplarity isn't everywhere. So I say, you steal, you pay, especially when you're a politician.
Now, the courts convicted Le Pen and several others from the party for misappropriating European Union funds. In effect, Le Pen is guilty of using EU money to pay party officials. Now there is still time for the presidential elections in France, with polls due to be held in 2027. The big question now is, will Marine Le Pen's trial be a make or break moment for France's far right? Now, Brazil is witnessing massive rallies as ex-President Jair Bolsonaro tries to rally support for himself.
The 70-year-old is facing charges of plotting a coup 2 years ago. Bolsonaro headed a massive demonstration on Sunday calling on his supporters to protest against the Supreme Court's charges against him. Close to 45,000 people attended the rally.
Only a psychopath would say that what happened on January 8, 2023 was an armed attempt at a military coup. I'm in their way. If they think I'm going to give up, that I'm going to run away, they're wrong.
Now, Bolsonaro is demanding amnesty for those who have been convicted of an attack in Brasilia in January 2023. 2 years ago, thousands of Bolsonaro supporters stormed the presidential palace, Congress and the Supreme Court, calling for President Lula da Silva's ouster from power.
Jair Bolsonaro will now face trial on coup charges. If convicted, he faces a potential 40-year prison term. The ex-president is rallying his supporters in an attempt to sidestep the trial so that he can contest elections again next year. In the heart of Arkansas, a Little Rock Zoo, a unique and beautiful bond has been unfolding.
Two mothers, one human, one gorilla, who shared a journey of pregnancy together. Take a look. All right, with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. Lots more on the other side of World DNA. The US Supreme Court has denied a plea filed by 2611 attack accused Tahir Rana seeking an emergency stay on his extradition to India. We'll bring you the latest on that.
China is planning to build an airfield in Bangladesh. Media reports suggest that the airfield will challenge India's security interests along the eastern border. We'll get to the latest on the other side.
Watch me on Token Money Magnet, where I decode tokenization for you only on WION.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act AGOA thrown into disarray following President Trump's tariffs on African countries, including Lesotho. The tariffs could be a death knell for US-Africa trade pact. South Africa, Zimbabwe and the AU react. A wedding becomes emblematic of Eastern Congo's ongoing turmoil as M23 control over the region leaves couples in legal limbo. And teams from all over the world take to the pitch at the annual Granny's World Cup in South Africa's far north, with 30-minute games played at a slow but purposeful pace. Watch World of Africa at these times on WION. World is one.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Unlocking the future of finance.
Dive into the world of tokenization with me
as we yield the power of tokenization.
Discover the future of
ownership, where I decode, demystify tokenization for you.
Empowering the tokenized revolution.
Get ready to dive for an in-depth look at tokenization.
Busting the myths around tokenization.
Catch me on Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet only on WION.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with Haim and I'm Shivan. Lots more to discuss on this side of the show. Let's start with the headlines.
Temperature soars in North India. Weather agency issues yellow alert for New Delhi as mercury rises over 40 degrees Celsius in April first week for the first time since 2011.
If that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
US vows 50% extra duty on Chinese goods if Beijing does not retract its planned counter tariffs. China says it will fight US tariffs to the end.
US stock futures rose early on Tuesday, a day after the S&P 500 extended losses for a third straight session following President Trump's tariffs. Dow further futures surged 476 points, while Nasdaq and the S&P futures gained over 1%.
Iran says it will hold indirect talks with the US in Oman on Saturday after Donald Trump claims that Washington was starting direct high-level talks with Tehran over its nuclear program.
Heavy rain leads to severe flooding in Democratic Republic of Congo. Dozens of people killed, hundreds forced to move.
Volcano erupts in central Philippines, sending plumes of ash over 4 kilometers into the sky. Canlaon Volcano is one of the 24 active volcanoes in the Philippines.
Donald Trump honors World Series champion LA Dodgers at the White House. The US president praised the likes of Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts in what he described as a legendary season.
The US Supreme Court has denied a plea filed by 2611 attack accused Tahawur Rana seeking an emergency stay on his extradition to India.
Now, this clears the way for his handover to India. Tahawur Rana sought a stay on his extradition and surrender to India, citing a pending litigation. He had cited the risk of torture and poor health in his failed bid to block extradition. A notice on the Supreme Court's website stated that Tahawur's application has been denied by the court. The Canadian national of Pakistan origin is presently being held at a detention center in Los Angeles. He will be handed over to the NIA by FBI on a day to be decided by both sides.
It was in February this year that Donald Trump had announced the approval of Rana's extradition to India during Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington, D.C. Tahawur is known to be associated with Pakistani-American terrorist David Coleman Headley, one of the key conspirators of the 2611 attacks. David Headley had allegedly conducted a recce of Mumbai before the attacks by posing as an employee of Rana's immigration consultancy.
Now, China is planning to build an airfield in Bangladesh. This as per an Economic Times report.
Now, it will emerge as a challenge for India's security interests along the eastern border, including the Chicken's Neck. Now, this region is based strategically located in northwestern Bangladesh, closer to Jalpaiguri and Cooch Behar districts of West Bengal. The Chicken's Neck is geographically closer to the area.
Now, the proposed airfield might have figured during Bangladesh interim regime's chief advisor Mohammad Yunus's visit to China, though there is no reference to the project in the official documents.
The Indian armed forces have taken extensive steps to enhance security in the region, including deploying S-400 air defense missile systems. A squadron of Rafale fighter jets was already stationed at Hashimara Air Base alongside the MiG aircraft.
This as Bangladesh takes steps to align the country more closely with China and Pakistan, posing new challenges for India.
Bangladesh recently announced that its Air Force officers are heading to Pakistan to receive training on JF-17 fighter jets, jointly developed by Pakistan and China. The JF-17 jets will be deployed at the Lal Monirhat Air Base, which is only 120 kilometers from the Hashimara Air Base.
Now Yunus is back from China and all set to welcome Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar. Dar will visit Dhaka from the 22nd to the 24th of April. He is the first Pakistan Foreign Minister to visit Bangladesh in over a decade. Hina Rabbani Khar was the last one to visit Dhaka, that too in 2012.
Asian stocks rebound after their worst day on record, but Chinese shares look set for another rough start due to the ongoing trade spat.
Now on Black Monday, waves of volatility shook markets anew. Stocks, bonds and commodities were whipsawed by another deluge of headlines around President Trump's trade war that only reinforced the clouds hanging over the outlook for investors.
But early on Tuesday, shares in Japan and Australia advanced at the open along with futures contracts for US and European stocks. Contracts for Hong Kong pointed to losses after a gauge of US-listed Chinese shares fell more than 5%. This came after Trump threatened to slap additional 50% tariffs on China for its retaliatory stance.
Now, traders looking for stocks to bottom after a sell-off of trillions of dollars were faced with a series of twists and turns on Monday. While the S&P 500 moved away from the threshold of a bear market, its 7% intraday swing was the biggest since 2020 when COVID hit global trading. Many metrics are at panic levels associated with meaningful bottoms over the past 40 years. Hedge funds recorded their largest ever one-day net sales of global stocks. The slump has taken US stock valuations to the lowest level since late 2023.
Amidst the global sell-off, the US stock market had a manic Monday. At just after 10 a.m. US time, fake news erupted that Trump was weighing a suspension of the tariffs. Within seconds, stocks soared wildly, erasing all of Monday morning's losses. But the S&P 500 climbed as much as 3.4% as stocks started to surge. The S&P had added over $2.5 trillion in value within 7 minutes. Still, even after the White House denied the report and stocks gave back their gains, the selling fever subsided.
Now, stocks remained well above their Monday lows. The episode served as a reminder that it doesn't take much now to spark a sudden rally. That was the 15 minutes that rocked stock market desks. Volatility convulsed other markets as well, with traders continuing to price in a high risk of a global recession. The VIX index, also known as a fear gauge, spiked to hold at pandemic-era levels. The brief halt to the US stock sell-off, however, was a welcome respite after markets slid around the world.
China was particularly hard hit, with the Hang Seng index falling 13%, its biggest slide since 1997. Europe's main gauge plunged to the lowest since December 2023, and Germany's DAX index briefly sank 10% before recovering.
Now, the stampede in global markets gathered momentum on Monday, and investors piled into safe haven assets as the fallout from US President Donald Trump's tariffs deepened.
Now, the carnage in financial markets has analysts betting on 5 Federal Reserve rate cuts this year, up from just 2 last month. Now, the Fed's dot plots project just 2 rate cuts this year, but traders have increased their rate cut projections to 5, as I mentioned, this year on recession bets last month. Just 2 cuts were fully priced, and that changed to 3 last week. Now, a total of 1.5% cuts are priced in.
Now, the swaps market shows a chance of about 40% that the Fed lowers rates by 0.25% by next week in an emergency move. Those rate cut bets are for well before the Fed's next scheduled policy decision on the 7th of May. The rapid repricing reflects the fear sweeping global markets. The yield on the US 2-year bond, among the most sensitive to monetary policy, fell as much as 22 basis points to 3.43% on Monday.
Now, that comes after about 50 basis points fall in total since Trump announced the levies last Wednesday. The bond market is also signaling a Fed rate cut soon, but will the US central bank step in? Will it focus on the massive wealth loss from the bloodbath in markets, or will it look at surging prices from the Trump tariffs instead? The Fed has previously voiced concerns on Weak losses from market slumps. However, stagflation risks are likely to limit the Fed's ability to intervene to support the economy. Still, market watchers expect the Fed to preempt the economic loss and step in. Trump, though, is showing little appetite to back down on aggressive trade tariffs announced last week. He told reporters on Sunday evening to forget markets for a second. He and his team dismissed investor fears of inflation and recession, offering no apologies for the turmoil sparked by sweeping global tariffs and defiantly insisting a boom is on the horizon. And Indian tech stocks faced a meltdown as the impact of tariffs have dimmed outlooks for the sector.
But is the sell-off just numbers on a screen, or will it impact jobs and investments in export services sector? That's what this next report decodes. Take a look.
India's tech giants are staring down a brutal earnings season as panic grips investor sentiment. The tariff shock from US President Donald Trump has triggered a global market rout, and Indian tech stocks are right in the line of fire. On April 7th, India's big giants nosedived 4%, dragging the Nifty Tech Index to a 10-month low. It's now down over 22% this year. Fears of a US recession and stalled tech budgets wiped out investor confidence, and there's growing anxiety over possible job cuts if demand doesn't bounce back. The storm isn't just market-driven, it's structural. Indian tech firms rely heavily on the US for revenue, with Trump reviving protectionist tariffs and clients pulling back on discretionary spending. The business model itself is under stress. Q4 earnings are expected to disappoint, with analysts warning of a weak revenue growth, cautious commentary and fragile margins. Delayed deal ramp-ups, tight tech budgets and sluggish global banking demand are piling pressure on top-tier firms. Investors will be watching TCS and Infosys closely as they kick off results season, but with no clear recovery in sight, even strong order books may not be enough to calm nerves, according to experts. The sell-off isn't just numbers on a screen. It's a new reality for Indian tech firms in a rapidly evolving global trade order. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, the United States is undergoing a significant shift in its foreign policy, causing concern and uncertainty among its allies, including South Korea.
A secret Pentagon memo directed the US forces in Korea to prioritize deterring China's seizure of Taiwan. Now, the memo has surfaced days after China's live-fire military exercise around Taiwan. The new Pentagon policy could shift the primary mission of the 28,500 American troops stationed in South Korea from deterring North Korea to countering China. A move that for Seoul risks creating a security vacuum.
Now, according to a March 29th Washington Post report, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth distributed a classified document that was titled Interim National Defense Strategic Guidance across the US Defense Department in mid-March. This document reportedly outlines US President Donald Trump's vision for preparing for and potentially winning a conflict against China, while also defending US interests in the near abroad region, including Greenland and the Panama Canal. The document aims to restructure America's Indo-Pacific military initiatives.
But this won't be the only blow to South Korea's security. Earlier, citing sources, the South Korean Yonhap news agency reported that last month South Korea and the US agreed to a months-long deployment of the Patriot Advanced Capability 3 from South Korea to West Asia. US is facing persistent challenges from West Asia. Tensions with Iran are on the rise, even as it fights Houthis in Yemen. This is the first known instance of equipment belonging to the USFK being relocated to West Asia. The UEFA Champions League quarter-finals are here, and the standout tie of the last 8 sees holders Real Madrid take on Premier League giants Arsenal.
Now, the last time the two teams faced off in the competition was 19 years back, when a goal on Thierry Henry was the difference between the sides over two legs. On that occasion, Arsenal reached the final of the competition, eventually losing to Barcelona, and the Champions League title still evades them.
That's why I came into football, that's why I came into management, and especially to this football club. It's been 20 years since we had this type of game, and for us it's a great opportunity to build our own story, and this is what we're here for.
To continue their quest for a maiden Champions League crown, Arsenal must beat the kings of the competition. 15-time winners Real Madrid, the Spaniards aren't in the best of form after having lost to Valencia in the Spanish La Liga on Saturday. But whatever their domestic troubles might be, Real Madrid are perennial favourites to win the Champions League.
We can't think about the criticism when we have a match every 3 days. We failed in the match against Valencia. We analysed and assessed that. Like I said after the match the other day, we have to prepare well for this match. It's obviously very important. A very important 90 minutes, but not decisive because there's another 90 to play at the Bernabeu.
Now, Arsenal themselves have been impressive in the Champions League this season. They scored 9 goals in the round of 16 tie against Dutch side PSV Eindhoven, and Mikel Arteta's side will also be bolstered by the return of forward Bukayo Saka, who made his comeback from injury last week.
For me, I want to win, and I want to win wearing this badge. So I think this